Hey folks, Amanda here. Just a quick heads up that from time to time, the Survivor's Guide to Thriving podcast does include some adult language. So if you've got kids with you, you may just want to hold on to this episode to listen to a little later. Enjoy! Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Survivor's Guide to Thriving podcast. We have a special treat for you today. Back in February, Mark had the opportunity to meet with BJ Eick, the founder of Herd Mark Media. Not only is BJ a good friend of ours, but he's also an alum of our Millennial Mastermind for Agribusiness program. BJ hosts his own podcast called The Story of Agriculture, which, by the way, you all definitely need to check out. And that's where this interview between Mark and BJ originally aired. So with that, enjoy this episode of the Story of Agriculture podcast, featuring our own Mark Jewell.
Hey everybody, BJ Eick here. Welcome to today's episode of the Story of Agriculture podcast, where we talk with Mark Jewell, a speaker, trainer, and coach that helps people and organizations stop surviving and start thriving. Mark has been my personal coach, and I've participated in some of his programs. I wanted to have him on today to talk about what he does and how his role fits into agriculture. So Mark, thank you for coming on the show today.
Brother, thank you. Glad to be on here with you. This is an honor and a privilege to be hanging out with BJ Eick, doing a podcast recording in my hotel room. But
yeah,
I always you gotta do it where you gotta do it. No, it's been very cool to see your growth, your business growth, the way that you guys impact people in so many ways. This podcast included. So I'm just super jacked to be on here with you.
Appreciate it, man. The Mark is the owner of Mark Jewell Speaking and Training. He helps coach people and helps build organizations through establishing their leadership. Mark, I think that you have a very cool job. Tell us what you do when you go into a company and how you apply the things that you do to agriculture.
You bet. So when we get engaged, let's say with whether it's an individual such as yourself that's hiring me, or an organization brings us in to do something, typically there's some desire to get better at something, whatever that might look like. So our mission is to help people and organizations stop surviving and start thriving. And at the base level, I mean, we believe, a lot of society. Let's look around. You can go into any business. I'm looking out the window at an IBM cubicle farm over here. I see hotel workers walking around the hotel with their heads down that are not fully active and engaged in what they do. I can go into almost any business, and that includes agribusiness, unfortunately, where we know that at least 70% of the employee population is disengaged to some level.
70%.
At least 70%.
Wow.
And that's not some Mark Jewell made up statistic. I mean, that's well researched by Gallup. I mean, those are their numbers. And so, there's another percentage beyond that where, there are people that are actively disengaged, which may be costing your company a lot of money. And you just think about it, at the end of the day, if you have a salesperson or a manager or leader and they're not fully engaged, which means they're not fully bought into the mission, they're not fully living and breathing why they do this job, why this company exists, what are you contributing to the world that is beyond, just making widgets and just doing what you do. So if they're not fully engaged in that mission and cause, which so few people really truly are, we know they're missing details. We know that they're potentially leaving money on the table. We know that there may be inefficiencies, and those are the kind of things when you think about, what do you help people with? From an organizational standpoint, if you can make up even small percentages of that over time, it's a pretty dramatic impact to the bottom line, right? So that's the organizational, the dollars and cents of it all, right? But the other piece is, I hate to see people surviving their life. I mean, my true belief is I get one shot at this. BJ gets one run, at life. I get one run, and in this suit called Mark Jewell. Whatever happens after that is not up to me. But so why spend it surviving?
Right.
Why survive the day? Why not be fully engaged in your role? I'm super lucky and super, super blessed because, well, I'm not going to say that. I mean, I believe in being blessed, but I work pretty stinking hard at my life to be able to go to a job that I've created for myself and feel just as energized at the end of the day as I did at the beginning. And not enough people have that. And you don't have to create your own business to have that. You can have that in the role that you exist in right now.
Yeah.
Right. It's just a matter of accepting that that's possible for you. So if I'm working with individuals, it's to help them realize that you're 100% responsible for your situation right now, and we can shift it today.
Mindset.
All about the mindset.
Do your background? You grew up on a farm in Minnesota. How did you? So you come from an agricultural background. Tell us a little bit more about your background, how that shaped you into wanting to do coaching and speaking and work with people in organizations.
Yeah, you got it. I'll be honest, it doesn't make sense. If you were to look at it with logical, commonsensical eyes, it doesn't make sense that I should be here getting ready to go on stage at this Ohio Agribusiness Association, industry meeting, right? I mean, and do a keynote in front of hundreds of people. I grew up in and around agribusiness in a very, very non-traditional way. A lot of my friends in the 4-H, that was involved in 4-H early on, and FFA, they all had cattle or pigs or some other form of livestock that had fur. Right. Even chickens to some extent, right? With feathers and not fur, but still was a living, breathing animal. I grew up on with a very, very diversified background. By my 10 until 20, and we were leech farmers.
Right. Fish bait.
Fish bait.
Yeah.
So we were the second largest exporter of live leeches out of the state of Minnesota for fishing bait purposes. It was Jewell Bait was the name of my dad's company, and that's what we did. I spent my summers in a boat wearing chest waders, catching leeches. That was my job. So
not many people can say they've had that job.
Not a lot. There's not, that's not something that, it's something you put on a resume to get people's attention and to create conversation and hope that they forget about what you don't have in your background. But I mean, that's where I got my start, really. I mean, from an entrepreneurial perspective, my dad was really smart because he always made me set up everything as my own business. So even when I was working for him, technically I was self-employed. I had my own boats, my own traps, my own bait, my own truck.
Really?
And I had to sell that bait to him. Yeah.
Cool.
So it was very much kind of a cooperative experience. I mean, there was you weren't going to go try to get a better price for your leeches with the next, shipper down the road.
Right.
But,
Right.
But he made me run it and keep my own books, and, it was very much entrepreneurial. He was a lifelong entrepreneur. From dairy farming to aerial photography to crop dusting to being we actually had fox on our operation. I did have furry animals, but you couldn't show them at the county fair. Right. We had fox on our farm. I don't know where you'd put one if you were to show a fox. I mean, you can't take it you literally have to put a fox in the hen house.
There's no barn for the
There's
fox
no barn.
to live in.
Yeah. So, but we raised fox just like a cow-calf herd. We
Sure.
had 500 females, and we'd breed them in the winter and then raise them up over the summer, and then you'd kill them and skin them in the fall, and that was the business. And then the fur industry went under in the late 80s. Effectively, the animal rights activists killed the fur prices, and they've never recovered.
Yeah.
The fur industry was not well organized like your dairy and cattle and pork, any of the commodity organizations. There's no commodity. There's no checkoff program for fox people. So we were not well organized. Animal rights attacked, and they won. Yeah. In that case. And so that's kind of one of the big reasons that took us into a couple other ventures. One was raising shiitake mushrooms. That was our winter job. And then shipping leeches. That was our summer job. Yeah. And that's kind of what I grew up doing. So it was very, very diversified, very interesting. But I always, when I wasn't working in the family business, I was milking cows or baling hay or doing something of that nature. Was active in, like I said, 4-H and then FFA. That led me into the leadership realm. I discovered that I liked speaking. That led me to do a lot more of that. I was doing summer conferences, had all the leadership positions that FFA would give me. Eventually they said, hey, you're decent at this. Why don't we pay you? And I start to I had the opportunity to go and fly around the country and then eventually the world, doing some stuff for the U.S. government, doing youth development overseas. And it was just snowballed. And it hasn't like it's been my main business or my main form of income, but it's the only consistent thing that I've done my entire career is speak and train.
Yeah.
And now coach.
We talked a little bit about this already, but for people who might not know exactly what a coach does,
right,
or might laugh a little bit when they hear that someone's doing coaching,
right,
or they just aren't sure how coaching and training can impactful. I mean, and so many trainings you go to are boring, or they're a place where a company shoves their employees in the room to get rid of them for the day,
exactly,
or to onboard them. Mm-hmm. What do you do as a coach, and how is it different from what people are used to seeing in training?
Yeah. So it's a great question, because what we do is so dramatically different from what the rest of the industry, with those that do what I do in our industry, have to offer. Because most of the world is out there trying to fix what you are naturally not good at. Right? Trying to fix what's broken with you, trying to fix something that's wrong with you. And we're basically just taking the perspective that what if there's nothing actually wrong with you? You know?
What if you're the way you are for a reason?
Exactly. Yeah. So what if, given all of your all the things that are beautiful about you and all of your flaws, and then they combined, there's the experience of BJ, there's the experience of Mark, and our spouses and kids and friends and customers and colleagues and all this stuff. Like, everybody's has this very, very unique skill set. In fact, we can scientifically prove that your strengths are as unique as a thumbprint. There's literally no other person in the universe like you.
Yeah.
Right. With your unique skill set, and regardless of what's going on. And so what coaching is, to come back really to the question, is helping you discover those things that were already great about you and then capitalizing. Right? That's really the focus that we're taking on now, is helping you remember what you naturally know is good about you and peel away all the stuff. I'm censoring my language for your podcast, BJ. If it was my podcast, it wouldn't be so toned down. But we're censoring the stuff, just the crap, that you've piled on over the lifetime, trying to prove yourself to other people. Right. And so we're gonna take a look at what are some of the stories that you're stuck in, and do they serve you or do they not serve you? And if the answer is no, how do we get rid of it? Coaching boils down to two things: perspective and accountability. Right? We go to coaching to get a new perspective, a new outlook, to learn some new information, and maybe somebody sees you differently, maybe even better than you see yourself. Right? We were just talking about this over lunch, and how we're both relatively big dudes, 6'2", 6'3", 6'4" or more. And but when you think about yourself in your mind, I don't think about myself as 6'3", 200 pounds.
Right.
I'm still a small version. I'm the kid version of myself in my head.
Right.
Right. And so sometimes you play into that small version. We all do that to some level.
Sure.
So, so coaching is really helping people get in touch with, okay, we just did this exercise at an event recently. So given today, and by the way, this is a corporate leadership event, and we're having these types of conversations, right? So the conversation was, if the 10-year-old version of yourself was here today, would he praise you and be giving you applauding from the stands at who you've become, or would he be kicking your ass?
Right.
Because he's
disappointed.
Exactly. Disappointed in all the things that you compromised and sacrificed that caused you to go into survival mode and just try to keep yourself alive and keep those around you happy. Would he or she be proud of you? And then, so on the flip side, on day 2, we focus on, okay, the version of you 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what needs to happen over the next 5 years in order for that person, or for the person you are today, or that 10-year-old version of yourself from the past, to tell a great story, to be really, really proud of you. What would that take? So that's, some of the stuff that we do from a coaching perspective, is help people get in touch with that. But then, one of the things that we do is, it's kind of unique, because we do focus on the corporate space here in agribusiness, is So knowing that stuff about us, we always focus on the mindset. Mindset is number one, getting in the right mindset. But then we incorporate a little bit of skill set. Here's a way that you might be able to sell your crop inputs better. Here's a way that you might be able to buy grain a little bit better. Here's a way that you might be able to connect with farmers better from a sales perspective. Or here's how to lead people better in your role as a location manager, as a VP of your company, or whatever. So we can incorporate both.
I actually had the opportunity to spend a day with Mark one time, and he was doing sales training calls, and they talked a lot about the way people saw themselves and gaining clarity around that, but also some of the things that you were doing from a sales training standpoint were helping people figure out a new way to position their sales pitch to a potential customer, of how they were looking at more expensive seed corn being an investment rather than an extra expense to the farm, or if you were losing out on those extra bushels, or how you taught people to kind of reframe the conversation around the products that they were selling. So there's some of that as well.
Well, absolutely. So there's the tactical skill set stuff that we need to be able to do to be great at our job.
Right.
But then on the other side, there's the what good is the skill set if you don't have the guts and the mindset to be able to use it?
Right.
What good is the best tool in your toolbox if you don't have the ambition to get up and go do the project?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So
LeBron James doesn't score any points when he's on the bench.
Exactly. So our belief, we focus on the whole person.
Sure.
Yeah.
We talked about how accountability is a big part of coaching and training. One of your programs is the Millennial Mastermind for agribusiness.
Yep.
What is a mastermind, and how does a mastermind group play into accountability?
It sounds like an evil plot, right?
Sure.
That's the way a lot of people look at it. So the reason we use the word mastermind is because, it's great to have a coach and get one other person that you can have accountability from, but it's also great to have a team of people that you can also get perspective from. So what it does is it actually creates this kind of three cornerstones. Like one is you, one is your coach, right, to drive the bus to and from where you got to go, but then having your team around you that also holds you accountable, that gives you fresh perspective. A lot of the people that come into our programs will be at a place in their life where they feel like nobody could possibly be screwing this up as badly as I am right now. Like how can anybody be as bad as I am at sales or at leading, or nobody could be screwing up their budget or having people quit their company, at the rate that is happening to me.
Yeah.
Like that's the story that almost everybody that I work with, that I encounter, is stuck in. The reality is I can walk across the street and introduce them to somebody else who's got a similar job that has the exact same problems or very, very similar problems to them,
right,
but we don't see it. And so what a mastermind group does is it gets you together with other people, both in the classroom, and then we do it in weekly coaching sessions with groups of 3 people, so that you're accountable to them. And we create ways to communicate in between times so that you're not only just talking about what's not going well, but you're celebrating the wins. And so if you are a salesperson and you commit to go talking to this one, these 10 accounts, and 2 of those all of a sudden turn into customers or really, really good prospects, we actually share that back with the group. So you're getting immediate feedback, high five, virtual high fives, that kind of stuff, if you will. And then on the flip side, if there's something that they are struggling with, they can bring it to the group and know that what happens in this group stays in this group, and it doesn't get shared back with your boss. It doesn't get, posted on social media or anything like that. Like, this is a safe place where you can come and say, hey, this really sucks right now. What would you guys do if you were in my position? So it creates a space where people can talk and really what we call masterminding. If you want to, the concept, the idea of this goes back to a 1936 book by Napoleon Hill called Think and Grow Rich. Right. And so the masterminding concept has kind of come from that book. If you're looking for a great resource to tag up in show notes or something like that, it's a must read, I think, for all Americans at this point, given the current status of the country. But that's a big recommendation that I'd have, and that's really what it comes from. It's creating group accountability in addition to personal and coaching accountability.
A lot of your work focuses on working with millennials. We talk about your keynote tonight is called Thriving Across Generations. Mm-hmm. why are millennials such a controversial group? Why are they the topic of conversation and continue to be? I feel like we've been having this conversation about millennials for years and years now, but
exactly.
It's we haven't reframed that conversation yet, I don't think.
Yeah, and it's and it's getting a little old. We've actually started to shift away from it because the oldest of us millennials are now old enough to be president.
Right.
Like, you have a really, really good chance that the next president of the U.S. is a millennial.
Yeah.
There's a really, really good chance. We're 80% of the workforce, or will be within the next few years. So, a lot of good stuff coming out from the millennials. Why is it so controversial? Here's the deal. I think every new generation has a different smell, has a different look, and we're tribal creatures. And so your instinct is to try and make everybody that is in your tribe look and act like you.
Right.
Right. And our organizations are the most diverse that they've ever been. Our communities are the most diverse that they've ever been. If you are let's just be honest, most of the people that would be potentially listening to this from an agricultural perspective are probably middle-class white people.
Right.
Okay. Well, that's not necessarily the case anymore. We're a minority.
Right.
Right. I mean, of the general population. Right. So that's just, there's an increasing number of what we call minority in the population that are, going to be taking jobs and working jobs in your industry, not taking jobs, but I mean, earning jobs. Sure. Right. And so you have a much more diverse industry than we've ever expected, both and just even from a gender basis, right? From male and female population. So there's a lot of different and interesting things kind of happening around that. So the tribe doesn't look like the tribe looked in the 80s, in the 90s, in the 70s, in the 60s. Okay, so the tribe looks different, and so that makes some people uneasy. Not just I'm not talking about like racial boundaries or gender boundaries or anything like that. It just looks different, and so you can't address it the same way.
Sure.
You have different cultural preferences that are alive and well in the workplace now, and so what's common sense to you isn't common sense to me.
Right.
There is no, if you were to measure what is the average common sense around a way you should go about doing something, or how something should be done, or how people should act, or what work ethic looks like, you can't measure the average.
Right.
Right. So there's no standard.
Right.
So what you have now is a kind of a punchy generation who's willing to challenge the standard and question, are our 90-hour work weeks healthy? Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are the standards of how work got done in the past, where families were left alone for, days, weeks, months at a time, right? Is that the world that we want to create and live in going forward? So what you see from millennials is we're challenging that, right? And I'm not so sure that we're 100% wrong. Right. Now, there's times when it creates strife through high turnover, and that costs companies money, costs organizations real dollars and cents, and that can be hurtful to progress and those kind of things. But we've got to take a look at the fact that millennials are controversial, just like every other generation that was new before them was controversial in their own right. Baby boomers were the devil according to the traditionalists and the generation preceding that.
It's the same process repeating, and it will repeat again.
Exactly. And we will do the exact same thing 20 years from now. In fact, we're doing it. Like within the millennial generation, you see parity, right? So you see this year, as of 2017, the cutoff is probably 29-ish to 30, right? So there's the 29 to 37-year-old millennial, and then you've got the 29 and under down to about 21, right? So there's kind of 7 years on either side of this boundary, and there's a very different smell to the younger half of the generation than there is to the older half, to where we come from, right? Yeah. And so you see millennials who are 33, 32, 35, who are like running to join the Gen X bandwagon because they don't want to be millennials because of the stigma, right? And then you have others, even that are 25, are like, well, I don't act like them. Like, that's not my norm. Like, so to some extent, we've kind of branded the millennials as bad, right? And I don't even know that we talked about baby boomers is that what we called them in the 60s when they were coming of age? I don't think so. When they were in their 20s and 30s in the workforce, we didn't necessarily call them that, but they were every bit as controversial. They had a different work ethic, they had a different smell, and they ended up creating the world that we live in today.
So what is the challenge that millennials in the workforce face that as they deal with the older generations in management and so forth. And like you said, a lot of millennials are moving up into the management stages of the business by now. And so what are the challenges that they face that you deal with the most in corporate training or in the corporate world?
I think one of the biggest challenge that I see millennials struggling with it boils down to one word: certainty. Always boils down to certainty. The follow-up word to that would be clarity. So with clarity and certainty come the ability to execute at a high level. The more clear you are in what you're creating and what you want, and the more certainty that you have, the greater your ability to execute. Execution is always proportional to those two things, to clarity and certainty added together. So certainty gets dinged because millennials, like let's be honest, we have been raised a little bit differently by and large, and this is generalizing not for your specific situation or the kid that grew up without parents or something like that, but generally speaking, we have a generation of people who has had somebody there providing a relatively deep level of feedback every day. Somebody's been there day in and day out, or at least week in and week out, helping you understand where you stand, what you've done.
They were at your soccer games.
Exactly. They showed up to all the sporting events.
Every stock show.
Exactly. So they were there for all the school events and the FFA events and the 4-H stuff and the county fairs. And, somebody was there providing input and feedback and telling you where you stood, including not just restricted to parents and family, teachers, additional school staff, aides, principals, even at the college level, there's more help for students than there ever has been before.
Yeah.
More accessibility to your professors than there ever was before. And so what has effectively happened as a result of that, good, bad, or indifferent, is we've not had to develop the muscle for decision making. Right? To be decisive, to make a decision and stick with it, stick after it and keep after it until we get the result that we're after, because somebody's kind of been there letting you know, like there's really something about, as you and I both know as entrepreneurs, about making a decision and rolling the dice and then just kind of seeing what happens.
Right.
Right.
You're the one picking up the pieces at the end.
Exactly.
Or celebrating.
Right. And it almost never turns out exactly like you think it was going to turn out. And then so if you always had somebody kind of, guiding you in the direction, a lot of times it might have turned out more like you thought it should have at the beginning. And unfortunately, in some cases, some folks are raised differently than others. Some of us had people literally doing stuff for us, right? And so if I ask that same question to baby boomers, like what was your childhood like growing up? How often was somebody there at your sporting events, at your livestock show, so the baby boomer generation, one of the biggest differences there is they were expected to, if they wanted to go play baseball, if they wanted to go to the county fair, you get on your bike and go. Right. You might be playing at 7 or 8 years old, very young. Like you could be playing outside in your community or out in the country all day long, and nobody really knew where you were.
Yeah.
Right. Now we've got trackers on kids. We put phones on them. We put right at a very young age. My daughter granted my daughter has a health issue. She's a type 1 diabetic, but within her little diabetes kit that she carries with her is a tile, right? And as long as that thing gets close to something with Bluetooth on it, I know where she is.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of things that we do with kids now. Like my kids at 9 and 7, my 2 older girls, are not going outside without an eye on them, in our neighborhood. And granted, we're not in like the peachiest neighborhood in all of Omaha, but it's not bad. Right. So why can't, if this was 30 years ago, they would be wandering blocks away
Everyone
potentially.
Would have been outside playing together, not worried about it.
Very, very different world. I don't blame it as much on technology as some people do. I think it's more about the way that we were raised.
Sure. And so there was somebody there giving feedback.
Yes.
That has caused a generation of people who haven't been able to, on their own, create as much clarity and certainty around what it is that they want to create or what it is they want to do. So they enter the workforce and they need a lot of feedback.
Exactly. So that's where a lot of it's coming from, right? So that's the certainty piece. Now the clarity is like just picking picking something that you want, deciding what you're going for, being willing to ask those questions that help you understand what are the expectations for you of your job. And in our defense, like, a lot of managers are pretty terrible at telling you what you're clearly creating, because sometimes they don't know.
Right.
So then you have the blind leading the blind. But until we get those two things put together, we're not. That's where we will struggle. So that's where you're looking for feedback. That's where the desire to go and get feedback comes from. I want to know, like, help me understand what I'm supposed to be creating. It's not intuitive to you, maybe, that you're just supposed to know if you're in that millennial group. As insane as that may sound to the preceding generations, that's the reality. And so that's where this desire for feedback is derived from. And so, and that's one of the big reasons, as why we're so bullish on coaching. This is a true story. So, I was out giving a program similar to what I'm going to give tonight several years ago in North Dakota. I remember it distinctly, in Minot, North Dakota. I get done with the workshop, and we've shared some of the tools and things that managers can do better with the next generation in order to manage them. And what we found, they came up to me afterwards and said, "Mark, I'm looking at your tools, and I find it interesting. I think they can work. I think they sound good. I agree with everything that you're saying. Here's the deal. I've got not only to manage these people, but I've got budgets to manage. I've got location to manage. I have $4 million of crop inputs to go sell myself. And then I've got to manage this team of people on top of it. And so my expectations are unfair. I don't have time. And that's the state of the workplace, is by and large, our leadership is so strapped because we have so few leaders, right? And then so many folks that work beneath these leaders. Even if you have 8 or 10 people, even 5 on your staff, that's a significant amount of time that needs to go into coaching that group. And most people are not creating and blocking that time in their
The leaders don't have enough time to spend guiding the people underneath of them.
Exactly.
They're focused and stretched too many different directions.
Yep.
So what's your recommendation to, we have a lot of college students, a lot of people who are entering their careers, who listen to the show. What's your recommendation to somebody who's maybe entering a job or has been in a job, and or maybe a student dealing with their programs in school?
Right.
How do you handle difficult situations in the workplace? How do you talk about these things with your employer so that you can sort it out and get the clarity you need to create?
Right. So there's a lot of different ways to go about this. And so if you can go back to the two things from the last question, right? Clarity and certainty. I don't care what you've got to do to be able to get that, but get that. Get clear. What are the expectations for you, and make them clear and get them listed out so that you know. Yeah.
Does that start with not being afraid to have hard conversations? Is that the first step?
Right. Well, which comes first, the chicken or the egg, right?
Sure.
But
if you go into a hard conversation without clarity,
so
you might not achieve the result you want. Is what you're saying?
Exactly. So let's peel it back to this. Okay. So the question, the reality that you might need to face is that not all organizations are Google, right? Or Zappos. And in agribusiness, I'll just be honest, there's not that many that really fit into that culture first mentality.
Sure.
Right? It's let's get the farming done first.
Right.
Mentality. That's how our industry is run. Everything revolves around that fact. And so when you think about going into an organization like this, we have this idea, we love this idea of culture, and a lot of organizations are taking a stab at it, but that if you're the employee, if you're the individual going into this job, or you're working with your professors at the university, or you're getting ready to go, maybe you're in your year 1, year 2 of the role, whatever, don't put the expectation on them that they're going to make you happy. That is a very, very poor habit to start off with in your early 20s, speaking from experience. Anytime in our life that we're waiting for somebody else to make us happy, to help us feel validated, we automatically start off at a disadvantage, because people will always let you down. And I'm not trying to be negative or pessimistic on people. People are great.
Yeah.
But if you're looking to others for that constant validation, specifically in the workplace, that person is eventually above you is going to get promoted. Or if they're good, they're going to get recruited to another company and go to the competition. So you can't always depend on that person to be there. And so the clarity and certainty piece, the clarity especially, is really important on getting clear on what's important to you and kind of knowing who you are. But I'm reminded right now of principle number 1 in Jack Canfield's book called The Success Principles. And so Jack Canfield wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul, or he was one of the co-authors in Chicken Soup for the Soul, which is, next to the Bible, I think the most successful book series ever written. And they got rejected by 144 publishers before they finally...
No kidding, I didn't know that.
They got rejected 144 times before somebody finally published their book. And, now look, and it's massively successful, dozens of versions in 100 different languages, right? So, but he wrote that in principle number 1 in the book, and I hate this one, to be honest. From a personal standpoint, I hate it because it doesn't leave you any place to hide. It says you're 100% responsible for everything that happens to you. Period.
Personal responsibility.
Personal responsibility, right? I'm 100% responsible for everything that happens to me. And I've hated that. And one of the big reasons I hated it, quick story, when I was 16, I got in a car accident. I hit a John Deere 4430 head-on with my little Mazda B2000 pickup when I was coming home from bow hunting one night. And I was lucky to live, first of all. I had a broken femur, busted, crushed tibia, fibula kind of thing, and 3 surgeries to get through it all and get everything fixed up and working right again. For years, I wanted to blame John Deere, right? For being because it was the John Deere tractor. And when I came to, after the accident, the first thing in front of my face is the yellow deer emblem, on the front end of that tractor. My head was literally where the rock box should have been on the front of that tractor, but they had taken it off the day before. It's the only reason we're sitting here having this conversation. And so I blamed it on John Deere for forever, and then I recognized, well, that's kind of stupid because it could have just as well been a red tractor or a blue tractor, right? Nothing. The tractor didn't drive itself into my little Mazda pickup, right? And so then I wanted to blame the kid that was driving the tractor. And I grew up with this kid. We went to school together since 2nd grade, graduated high school together. He was in my FFA chapter. And, I wanted to blame him. The reality is the part of the story that I didn't tell is the reason I was in that place at that time is I had been bow hunting. I waited in the deer stand that night for an extra 15 or 20 minutes because I heard this deer coming. Deer turns out to be a big gray squirrel.
Right.
So
that's the biggest bucks we never get always are.
Exactly. Yeah. So, it wasn't a deer at all. And so it was now beyond dark. It was later than I should have been staying in the deer stand. And then on the way, I go out to my truck. On the way home, I'm jamming out to Tub Thumping by Chumbawamba, which was circa 1997, right? So I'm jamming out to that, and so probably a little.
Which you never play that song on half volume either.
Oh, absolutely not, absolutely not. So you don't hear anything out the windows, and I'm going 35 down, a very hilly country gravel road, right? Which for those of us that grew up on gravel road, that's no big deal. But the reality is, I could have chosen to go 25, and I would have been in that position maybe 15 seconds later. I could have been going 45, and I would have been there 15 seconds faster. But the reality is I drove 35, and that was what was required to be in that position at that time. Call it fate, call it destiny, call it whatever you want. I made the decisions personally that put me in that position at that time. So when I read that book, for the first time I read it in my life was when I turned 35 years ago, almost 6 years ago now. I almost broke down because I realized, crap, I'm 100% responsible for my situation, for everything that happens to me. And
that as it may be, is an example revolving around an accident. So how does this apply to things that are your responsibility, taking care of your relationships, taking care of the work that you're supposed to get done on a daily basis?
Right. Yeah. So what it boils back to, you bring it back to the workplace situation. Okay. A lot of people are looking to blame the stuff that they didn't get right or the stuff that didn't go according to plan. They're always looking for somebody to blame. Yeah. Right. If you don't believe me, go watch the news tonight. You're going to see all kinds of finger pointing. If you want to look back a few months, go back to the last election cycle and look at, we're blaming all of our problems. Our model in the world is to blame other people, right? And so that bleeds, that infests the workplace. So they're always looking for somebody to blame. It's almost nobody's fault that their alarm went off at the wrong time or didn't go off or they slept through the alarm, right?
Sure.
Nobody wants to take personal responsibility for that one. So think about all the stuff. So around the clarity, this also includes your happiness, right? I'm 100% responsible for my happiness. So people are waiting for somebody else to make them laugh. They're waiting for somebody else to make them happy, to make them feel justified or whatever. And so that the reality is like that doesn't work, not sustainably, right? Yeah. It's the reason that people go home and they'll binge watch Netflix because it allows them to feel something that they weren't able to accomplish by themselves during the day. Right. And so 100% responsibility has got to be like the key thing. It's got to become a key cornerstone if you want to have epic levels of success without your career. You want to be average? Fine, blame people all you want. Right. If you're committed to mediocrity, good, whatever. We need those people too. But if you're wanting to be happy, if you want to be engaged, if you want to be thrilled with what you do every day, then you take control of that. Don't wait for the organization to create it for you.
Can you choose to be happy?
Can I choose to be happy? Yeah, absolutely. Any day of the week.
At any given time, you're responsible for the way you feel about something. You're responsible to the way you react to things that happen.
Exactly.
I think that was one of the biggest things for me in working with you was gaining an understanding that I could choose how I reacted to something.
Right.
If I was having a bad morning or I was running late, it never occurred to me that I could choose to react differently to those things. I just reacted in the way that maybe I had seen happen, in the relationships that I had known in my life, or maybe just off the cuff without much thought. And I learned how to take something and choose to react differently to it. And then it is absolutely true that you can do it.
No, I mean, you're spot on. It's a great question. Can you choose to be happy, right? I mean, that's really what this phrase means, the 100% responsibility, for your own self, for your own actions, for your own situation. That includes your financial situation, right? It's not the student loan's fault that you got $1,000 payment every month.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not the government's fault that you've got this payment due to them every single month. It's none of those things, right? You've chosen to put yourself in this position. You get to choose how you're going to pull yourself through it and go a different direction. So it's a huge get and it's a huge takeaway. A lot of us, what we all have is a lifetime of experience. And what you may not be aware of is that a lot of your hardwiring that goes on in your brain that drives your preferences to this very day happened by the time you turn 10 years old. So if you think about a lot of the experiences, the overarching kind of thoughts that were around you from the people that you were around and that were in your head before you turned 10 have a lot to do with what your preferences are today. And so that's what makes behavior change really tricky. And that's why we can't just flip everything on a dime and all of a sudden I go from, and we make it sound very simple, right? Oh, you can choose happiness. Well, there's a lot of people out there saying, bullshit. Yeah.
Oh yeah. There are a lot of people who
right?
aren't going to believe that.
Exactly. But it's like directionally we can start to reprogram those thoughts little by little. It's why the coaching and the follow-up process is so important. To come back to one of our earlier questions, I mean, one of the things that we do, we follow all of our trainings regardless of what it's about with a 90-day follow-up. It's got to be a 90 to 120-day follow-up. Otherwise we forget. And we go back to our old habits. It's very, very easy to go back to our old habits. Even 5 years down the road, if you committed to personal excellence today and creating personal change for the better in your own life, 5 years from today, if you're not still purposeful about that and defining the next new version of yourself, it's very easy to go backwards.
So what you're saying is you can choose to be happy, but if you want to exercise your ability to make that choice, you're going to have to do some work.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. There's some, we call it driving effort and that's what it is you have to drive the effort forward in order to be able to create what you want.
Do we continue to hear a lot of people talk about work-life balance? I think that is something that, every working person I've ever had a conversation with struggles with. They've got a family, they've got relationships, they've got people that they want to be around or things they want to do, but they also have this job which makes the things they want to do possible via dollars.
Right.
And so people struggle with this concept. I feel like you look at that a little differently in terms of thriving across all areas of your life.
Yeah. So you hear the work-life balance, and I think that's part of what the word balance does in your head is you literally see kind of like a scale almost balance. I mean, at least I do. I see a scale balancing two things kind of back and forth, and it's kind of got to go, and it's very touchy, right? So if you get one, it's like 1 ounce off, like, it starts to shift the wrong direction. And if it gets 10 ounces off, it switches very, very quickly, right? And in life life throws curveballs. Like if you decide today, I want to commit to personal excellence, and I want to have, I want to be happy more often. I want to feel like I'm my best at work. I want to have a great relationship. I want to get in shape again. If you decide that today, life is going to show up tomorrow and it's going to test you. It's going to start at 5 a.m. when the alarm goes off. And say, you really want to get up and go do this right now? You know what I'm saying? So work-life balance, I think, is baloney. Okay, what I call it is the work-life blend. And so somebody said something to me in another interview that I did recently. We were talking about kind of looking at your job description. And so what if in your job description, it doesn't necessarily match up with all the things that kind of turn you on and that make you really excited about your job? And what we've discussed in that conversation is, within your job description, you have more leeway than you think, right? So you can do your job and you can complete the competencies required to do a job really well, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do it exactly the way the person before you did it, right? And so what it boils down to is, what are your standards for how happy you want to be, right? And if you absolutely cannot make that happen where you're at right now in the job that you're doing, because it's so terribly impossible, then you have to have your standards, and you need to think about where else could you go to get this. But the problem with leaving, let's say, I'll get back to the balance thing here in a minute, but the problem with, like, say, leaving a job at your current mental state is that you can leave the job behind, but you take the mental state with you.
Right.
And a lot of people, all they do is they go to the next job, or they go to the next relationship, or they go to the next gym,
right,
and they create the same damn results, right? I'm 100% responsible for everything that happens to me. Most of the time, if we really look at it, it's not about the job. The grass is not greener on the other side. The grass is greenest where we water it, make sure it gets sunlight, and nurture it. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So that's an important piece to get. Now, take this work-life blend. We focus on 5 areas. So we focus on on your health. Okay, if your health is not in order, I mean, as you and I both know, the rest doesn't really work the way that you want it to. You'll always be limited by what level of shape that you're in, how much you're willing to develop your body's physical capacity to give you the energy and focus required to do what you do. One of the reasons people feel like they don't have enough time is because their body is actually limiting, because they're either eating the wrong foods, they're not exercising enough, they're not sleeping enough, they're watching too much Netflix right before bed instead of maybe reading something something that would be good for the brain, or putting a task list together right before bed. So it's not that you can't have it, and it's not that there's not enough hours in the day, it's that we're not utilizing the hours as good as we could. Let's be honest. Yeah. We all have an extra 15 minutes here, an extra 5 minutes there, an extra hour somewhere on the front end or the back end of the day, where if you just turn off the stinking TV for a little bit, or turned off the Netflix or Apple TV or your Amazon Fire Stick, right, right? Or just put Facebook down for a minute, you could reach out and connect with somebody, or you could give your wife or your husband a little bit more quality time and spend more time with them or something. Or this morning, I didn't have a great big bunch of time to work out. The hotel gym was full. I mean, full up. You couldn't get another person in there safely lifting heavy things. Sure. And so I went over to the pool area, and I can do a 15-minute workout that gets my heart rate up, that helps me build muscle, right? I can come back to my room and drink my protein shake, which fits in a nice little packet that I carry with me.
Right.
So the world is so convenient today that it creates so many distractions that make it easy, right? But the world's also so convenient today because it gives us the amenities, it gives us the things that we need in order to also get more of what we want in those areas. So the body is huge. So there's no excuse not to get just a simple workout. The only thing holding you back from having the body that you want, or having the energy at least that you want in your body to go to be able to perform all day long for you and yourself, right?
Sure.
So for yourself, for your relation, your spouse or your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your kids. Your family, your boss, your coworkers, your colleagues, your customers, those kind of things. Like
Everyone who relies on you.
everybody who relies on you, everybody that you touch throughout the day. The only reason that you don't feel like you can't get it all done is because you don't have the energy today.
Yeah.
And the lie that we tell ourselves is that it's not possible.
Right.
That's the
I
lie.
don't have enough time.
Exactly.
I'm too tired. I'm overworked. There are too many things on my list.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. Once you commit to leveling up, what you realize is there's actually no destination in life, right? If you've arrived at your destination, it's over.
It's done.
Yeah. So there will never be a destination. What a lot of people do is they get to a certain level, they get to that destination, and they say, "This is the body that I have, and that's as good as it's ever going to be. This is the bank account that I have. This is the relationship that I have, and that's the survival statement." Right. And that's as good as it'll ever be. So there's that. We focus on a spiritual component.
Yeah. I was going to say,
yeah.
That's body.
Yeah. There's four more.
Four more.
All right. I'll try to, I'll be as succinct as I can on these ones.
But I think it's really helpful.
Yeah.
Because we talk about in normal conversation, this is work.
Yep.
Life.
Exactly.
The two don't go together. They're separate from each other, and there are only two.
Yeah.
There are 5 areas of your life you should be paying attention to.
Exactly. And I mean, I could go all day on just the fact that we make work and life like so separate and different. In fact, I completely disagree with most HR policy, and the fact that you can, sue someone, and that's why we have HR policy.
Right.
But you can sue someone who understands too much of your personal details or asks about some of your personal details because they genuinely care.
Right.
Right? There's nothing to do with they're trying to leverage it against you. What happens is you're not in control of your own crap. And so eventually when something goes wrong and you know that somebody knows something personal about you and you're trying to save your hide, you play the blame game.
Yeah.
Yep. And then you can use the court system. And that's the crap that I really don't like. But so back to this 5-part concept. So we focus on what we call connection. Okay, our word is connection. So what are you connected to that's bigger than you? So if you're a spiritual person, then that's God. Right? So what is your connection to the Creator? Okay. If you're not a spiritual person, okay, then what cause? What cause are you connected to that you're studying something about every day and then actually taking time to do what we call meditation, like literally creating space for the mind to just empty.
Right.
That's one of the reasons. Yoga is picking up huge, right? There's yoga studios popping up every day in every neighborhood across America. That's one way. You're going to see the same. I think the prediction is over the next 20 years, you'll have literal meditation studios popping up all over the place.
Mental health is one of the biggest topics of our
biggest issues
of our culture today.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
We don't leave ourselves time.
Right.
And as the average population, we leave ourselves no time to clear our minds.
Exactly. So just, demanding of yourself that you deserve, not that you have to or not that you need to, but that you deserve 10 minutes, like to start with, 10 minutes a day somewhere in the morning, maybe midday, mid-afternoon to just gel. Yeah. Put on some earbuds, listen to some soft music, and breathe. That's all it is. It's so simple. Like we don't have to get the Buddha pictures out and light any candles or do incense. Like it's not that, right? Just meditate. Like just create some space. So that's the spiritual component, or what we call connection. What we find is that when you connect and when you get quiet, it actually connects you to to something bigger than you, and you start to get insights, or you'll think about that person who you need to reach out to, or somebody that needs a thank you card, or somebody that needs a hug, or something that you need to do for work. It's just so timely.
When you give your brain an opportunity to quiet down, it's amazing the messages that your brain has been trying to tell you all along that you weren't able to receive.
Absolutely.
You didn't have the space to process them.
Exactly.
So spirituality, connecting to something bigger, taking the time each day to reflect on that.
Connection is huge. So the next one is your relationship. If you're married, then it's your spouse. That's the one we focus on the most. Not that your kids aren't important and all that other stuff. That's one that especially moms really struggle with, right? Is a lot of times the kids, as soon as the kids show up in a relationship, they become more important than the marriage.
Yeah.
And we lose sight of the fact that after 18 years, those kids are gone. right? They're going to go get their own marriage. And you're going to be left with this person that you didn't pay attention to for 20 years. So that's an important piece. So in our work, we focus on the marriage. If the person is married, if it's a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, then focus on that one. Because what happens if those relationships go south, you get distracted. You can't maintain balance or blend within your life effectively. You'll get to, maybe temporarily a little bit depressed or sad. And so you maybe binge eat over the weekend, and then you just take a few days off from the gym, and then that has a way of snowballing into years off from the gym, right? So that there's things like that. So we got to take care of the relationship. And so did you show her today that you appreciate her? Did you tell her today that you appreciate her? Doing something on a daily basis. So that's the important one. And for those that don't have that in their life yet, reach out. Get a rotating basis of your top 5.
Friends, family.
Mom, dad, friends, family, brothers, sisters, whoever's close, where, if that person disappeared from your life tomorrow, and let's be honest, like, you don't know, right? None of us knows that we're getting home tonight. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So if I don't, who would really, miss me, or if they didn't come home tonight, who would I really miss? So I want to make sure that I go all in and invest in those relationships. The next one is your what we call occupation. It's the word we use now. And so occupation is kind of your job. It's what do you do? What do you do for a living? Or if you're I was a stay-at-home dad and a grad student for 3 years of my life, right? So I didn't have a job to go to. I didn't have work goals necessarily. I was working towards, something, but so that my occupation was dad, and graduate student. And so there are things, I wish I had this model then, because I would have been so much better at that occupation. But
you would have given yourself permission to be good at it.
Well, exactly.
Or to be the best you could be at it.
Yeah, absolutely. Instead it was kind of become something you had to do because you were stuck at home with kids all day.
Yeah.
That was very hard for a dude to do. And I think it's very hard for a lot of stay-at-home moms to do too, because they don't feel as much value as somebody who's going in and bringing home the bacon, so to speak. So, but the occupation, we basically focus on, like, did you plan your day and did you execute on something on that plan today before your day or your plan got blown to hell?
Yeah. Right.
So at least executing on one priority item, and then as your capacity expands, executing on 2 priority items. And as your capacity gets bigger, executing on 3 priority items. And what we find is little by little, with daily measurement on small things, we can expand over time to be able to do lots more big things. Right? But we just focus on what we can do now with your current capacity. Expand it little by little. And then the last one is contribution. So what are you contributing to that's bigger than beyond you, right? I'm not tithing at church is good. That's a measurement that a lot of people use. And we got all kinds of evidence that shows that if you donate 10% of your income to church or elsewhere, to charities that matter to you, that money comes back to you with interest. So that's a great measurement, but it's not everything. Did you go out of your way to hold a door for somebody at the grocery store? The pay it forward kind of stuff. Every time I'm driving through Omaha, if there's a homeless person or somebody that looks like they're, that's looking for a handout or something at the corner, I don't often give money. But if I've got, a granola bar or something in the car, or, we've always got kids, so we got like juice boxes and stuff, right? And my kids will actually put together little bags for the less fortunate, right? With like a little, like those silver warming blankets, like Mylar blankets, like something like that, with a juice box and a protein bar, and an orange or something like that, and we'll have them in the car, and then when we see somebody who needs one, we hand it out. It's just kind of a thing that we do, and it's pretty neat. But
that's really awesome.
Yeah, contributing to something beyond yourself, right? And it doesn't have to be big.
Yeah.
It can be as simple as if the parking lot's full on Black Friday and you happen to be a crazy person going out shopping on Black Friday, good for you, whatever. I'm not here to judge you. But if you give up that parking spot to somebody that, you don't know them, but you do it just because, I can walk the extra 50 feet.
Contribution is really about putting something other than yourself first.
Well, what it boils down to, it's you can't contribute in that way purposefully without creating a reaction, literally a biochemical reaction in the body that makes you feel better. So it automatically will put you into a state of gratitude. And you put yourself into a state of gratitude all day long. Or excuse me, even if you're grumpy all day long, as soon as you go into a state of gratitude, the anger feeling starts to go away. right? So it's a way to disrupt your pattern, because so many people throughout the day are so focused on just getting through the day, getting things done, getting the stuff off their list. They don't take the blinders off and look at what's going on around them. Right. And so what we are is we're reacting to the world. This gives you a space to stop and think about what's going on and actively contribute to it. Right. There's the whole butterfly effect. We've all seen the viral videos of things, where you see the effect of one person doing one good thing that somebody else sees.
Sure. Yeah. I want to talk about a part of your program is called the Survivor's Guide to Thriving.
Yep.
I don't want to go through the whole Survivor's Guide.
Right.
But for somebody who's listening is maybe interested in things you are having to say, I want you to answer a question, and that is, how do you know if you're surviving, if you're just getting by in life? How do you identify when you're in survival mode?
So that's a tricky one, because survival is often it's unconscious, right? But if you ever hear yourself saying something like, this is just my situation, this is as good as I'll ever be, there's just not enough time. That's a really big tip, that somebody's probably selling themselves short somewhere. If you feel like you could have more, or that if you took a quick second right after I say this and think about a time when you wanted to have more or do better or be better, but then you compromised, pretty good chance that over time you kind of just gave up on that thing.
You tell yourself you didn't deserve it, or yeah. So what does it look like when there are several layers here that we're going to skip over, and we're going to give you in the show notes how you can go listen to a video series that we actually made with Mark of how to go from surviving to thriving. Surviving to thriving.
Right.
So if that's what survival looks like, contrast that. What does thriving look like? So
you've all seen the team that's on a winning streak, right? It's just like, it seems like there's nothing that they can do wrong. It's the Major League Baseball team that wins 110 games, right? And they get on a 17-game winning streak or a 20-game winning streak or something like that, or the basketball player who just is on fire, right? And so you would probably describe it as momentum, right? You feel like you have momentum in life or momentum in a specific behavior, right? And or a specific aspect of life, and that thing seems to be working pretty well right now. So the results are showing up in your body, or the results are showing up at work, and it seems relatively easy, and that works. So that's when you're in momentum. That's when you'll feel that's what we call thriving.
If someone wants to find out more about you, we'll put this all in the show notes. Where, what events are coming up? Where can people find you? Social media, Facebook,
Snapchat. So it's Facebook is facebook.com/themarkjewell, I believe is the one that they had available for me. So that's my personal account, and I post daily, 2 or 3 times a day at least. I'm putting out some motivational content or something real, sometimes just to share with people about what's going on with us. And so we actually cover all my Facebook posts will always be within the Thrive with 5 areas that we talked about. So those 5 areas of body and connection and relationship and occupation and contribution. So I'm always talking about different things that I'm personally doing and to live and breathe the message. So that's a big one. Snapchat's kind of my favorite tool right now. I really love
Mark's Snapchat is on fire. You should watch it.
So I always have a lot of fun. Whether it's just sharing what's on my mind, doing a snap rant, doing funny pictures with my kids. I try to mix it all in. But it's Mark James Jewell it's just the full name. Mark James Jewell is the Snapchat handle if you're looking for that. Those are the 2 big ones. LinkedIn is out there. I'm not a big Twitter guy. You're welcome to do some stuff there. Occasionally things get posted through from Instagram to Twitter, but that's about it. Instagram we're trying to do some more things with. I just haven't found the business value as much over there. But Facebook and Snapchat are the 2 primary ways that we engage with our audience right now.
I was going to ask you one more question to wrap this up. What advice would you give yourself, 23-year-old Mark, to look back and to have gone through this and developed these programs and worked with all of these people?
Yeah.
What would you tell yourself?
I know exactly what I'd tell him. If I was to go back and see 23-year-old Mark Jewell, who graduated at 23 from the University of Minnesota with a degree in agriculture education, who was the president of the College of Agriculture Student Board, who got to have breakfast the morning that he graduated with the president of the university, all the provosts, all the regents, and Norman Borlaug, which those people are from the agronomy realm will know who he is, the first person to win the Nobel Peace Prize for work in agriculture, and my mom and dad. That's May 14th, 2004. I'm 23 years old.
Yeah.
Starting your career off on a pretty good foot, right?
For sure.
I wake up 7 years later, dissatisfied with my progress in life, very little in the bank account, a relationship that I didn't really want to be in anymore. Yeah. So what the heck happened from 23 to 30? Yeah. You know what I'm saying? What happened? And as I look at it now, after 5 years of ferocious work on myself, significant investment of time and money in myself to get better and to get back on track with where I thought I would be at this point in my career, the biggest thing is I did not purposefully create my 20s.
Yeah.
I did not purposely create. It comes back to clarity. What do you want? What are you after? What do you want to be known for? To the point where you're so vivid about it, like when you turn 30, how much money you'll have in your bank account. What kind of house you'd like to be living in? What part of the country would that be in? What would be the ideal company to be working with, or the type of job? How much would you like leadership responsibility, or do you want to be a part of a team? Do you want to be selling? Do you want to be leading? Do you want to be producing? Do you want to be making videos? Do you want to be marketing? Get clear. So many people are coming out of college right now. We're in Columbus, right? So they're coming out of the Ohio State University, not knowing what they're going to go create.
Yeah.
Right? They're taking the advice from people who also didn't purposefully create their 20s and probably their 30s, right? So they're taking advice from other people around them in their communities and their families on what they should go do. But those guys don't know. Only you know. Right. It's 100% responsibility. So if you show up in the same situation that I did when I turned 30, it's on you.
Yeah.
So if you want better than what I had or what I created, and if you want to accelerate, you could be where I am in my career today if you want to be a speaker, trainer, coach, you could create exactly what I've created, and you don't have to wait till you're 35.
Yeah.
You could do it by 26. Yeah. But you got to be willing to get clear on that being your mission.
Lack of clarity about what you want to create and what you want to do, number one reason for feeling like you're surviving.
I think so. I think, not having the clarity, and then not being, even if you do get clear, spending too much time trying to please other people and not being willing to stand in your own boldness about what that clarity is. Yeah.
We're going to wrap it with Mark here today. We got to get him off and ready for his keynote speech tonight. But thank you for joining us on the show, Mark. Thank you.
Man, this
Appreciate
has been a
it very
blast. Thank
much.
you for letting me just
We'd do another hour if you had it.
We'll do another one someday.
Thanks for listening to the Story of Agriculture podcast. It's your time to thrive today.
Survival's dead, baby. It's your time to thrive. Let's go get it.
Thanks for tuning in to the Survivor's Guide to Thriving podcast. You can find the show notes and links to all the resources mentioned in this episode by heading over to markjewelltraining.com/podcast. And if you feel so inclined, we'd love it if you could head over to iTunes and leave us a rating and review. That's what helps us move up in the charts so that more people can find us and start their surviving to thriving journey. See you next week.